some seaside location. We went there for a swimming competition, and we got to talking about energy topics over the breakfast. And then he just realized that it's not going to end over just one session of talking by the seaside, so he decided to take it to here as a formal sort of speech, meeting, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm here. My name is Kerem. I've been in the corporate world for over 15 years. I started out as an architect, working on the construction site. I lived in Afghanistan and Pakistan for 2.5 years, just after 9/11, where I gained most of my projects experience firsthand, dealing with everything over there. But then when I moved to Turkey, I started working for a Turkish construction firm which was interested in the energy and natural resources business. And there sort of I made the switch from a construction world to an energy and energy consulting side of the table. And then I joined a consulting firm, one of the biggest consulting firms, the biggest consulting firm in the world. And I served there for over 5 years, advising clients on their energy investments and other energy-related prospects in Turkey. I worked with clients from over 20 different countries. Turkey had a very vivid term of people interested in the investing in Turkey because of the regulations on the marketplace being very favorable compared to the rest of the world. So we saw a flock of investors coming in, and we had to give them the necessary experience and insight regarding the Turkish space of energy. All right. Moreover, I had the chance to work with the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources in Turkey, where we won a contract to help them formulate the medium-term energy strategy of Turkey. When I say medium-term, 4 to 5 years term energy strategy of the Republic of Turkey to be drafted, which right now can be accessed via their website. So I had the chance to firsthand discuss with policymakers. I had the chance to discuss with investors. I worked as a consultant, so I know the background of all the technical and financial evaluations. So I have been around the table, and I have had many hats in the energy business, so I sort of have an idea of what's going on in terms of the difficulties related to energy policy making. So let's start. It's a very ambitious headline probably to fit in a talk of about half an hour or so, but I'll try to briefly give you some hints and some background information about what is the energy trilemma and what are the main aspects of policy making in the energy business. When you use the word energy, it's most of the time we are referring to electric power. Why? Because actually energy is everything. I mean, energy is the oil you put in your car, energy is the food you eat. So you have energy everywhere. But electric power is is a form of energy that you can actually transfer from one place to another with all of convenience. So it's the form of energy that has penetrated our lives. Unless otherwise indicated, most of the time when someone says energy, it's related to electric power. And in the discussion here, we are related to the energy and electric power. But there are many aspects of this, because electric power is also generated from other sources of energy. So there's a background to this. So this is the ultimate form of energy. It's readily available on your wall outlet. You don't question where it's coming from, or most of the time you don't question how this is generated and brought to you, what is the journey behind the power that runs your refrigerator. But this needs to be something discussed and understood in order to be able to talk about policy making in energy. So think about it. You all have your refrigerators in your house. And they're useful stuff. Without energy, without the benefits of energy, you would lose a lot of advantages and luxuries you right now have in your lives. And that refrigerator could have actually been running on a diesel engine. Right? The diesel engine could have run on oil, could generate power, could run the compressor that squeezes the air and uses the gases that cools the air inside of the refrigerator. But it would be dangerous to have a diesel engine in your kitchen. It will not be very cheap, right? You have a lot of maintenance costs and that makes a lot of noise. So you have to have an easier form of energy readily available. So what happens is that you take the diesel engine out of your home, you put it somewhere else, and you transfer the energy produced, electric power, to your refrigerator, so that your refrigerator runs silently inside your home. You have the convenience of forgetting what's behind the wall outlet, what's going on behind the wall outlet. So, but right now you have a question. What if I produce energy with something other than a diesel engine? What if I use solar power, or wind power, or nuclear power, coal? Who decides what? And where do I place this generating facility? Is it behind the building I live in? Is it in my neighborhood? Is it outside of my city? Where is it? Where is something you don't actually think about unless it's some sort of a social topic that has seen some press, and you start worrying about where this is coming from. So, this is the fundamental question actually of energy. Aside from the resource availability, and when I say resource availability, I mean you cannot build a coal plant where there is no coal, or you can't bring coal, or you cannot build a solar facility if there is no sun, right? So this is resource availability. So aside from these technical details, what makes the investors who invest in these facilities decide where to invest and what to invest and how to size these things? And to be able to discuss this question, we need to understand some main properties of electric power and the value chain that brings power to our life. When I say value chain, the chain of activities that enable the power to be carried all the way to the place, to the location of use. And it's called a value chain because at each part, each link of the chain, there is a certain value addition to the process. So, the first rule of electric power is called Kirchhoff's principle. Engineers spend a lot of time with this, but this is basically summarized in a nutshell, is that electric current flowing into the system is always equal to the electric current flowing out of the system. Now what does this mean? It means that when you want to use power, it has to be generated instantaneously. It means that when you turn on your microwave or a coffee machine, you actually initiate something somewhere. Something starts to generate more power to be able to supply you. So you cannot store it, at least for now, technically speaking, except some operational exceptions. You can run out of a battery, but you can run your refrigerator out of a battery for a long time. You need power coming out of your wall outlet. Every time you turn on the light, every time someone starts using power, there is an activity of power generation or regulation going on somewhere, someplace. So whatever comes in, comes out. If there is too much generation compared to what's being consumed, then that generation has to be stopped at some cost because it will blow the system up. And when there is not enough generation in the system, then you have shortages. Now, there might be enough power in your system to run your microwave, but if 10,000 people start their microwaves at the same time, the system may not be able to supply it at that instant, and then what happens is that no one gets the power. It's cut off. So, and some other physical and commercial rules is that there's no post stamp attached to the electrons. It means that the power you're coming from, you cannot tell where this is coming from. You cannot tell if this is coming from a hydroelectric power plant, a dam on the northern coast of Turkey, or is it coming from a coal-fired plant? Is it coming from a solar panel facility or a wind source? You cannot tell it.
Electric is better than petroleum.
Yes, yeah. It's not a regional. It's the same electron. I mean, so actually, since Turkey is interconnected with Europe, it could have come from a source in, say, France, and found its way all the way up to here, metaphorically speaking, of course, because it's a live network that works instantaneously. And there's no flow to commercial contracts, which means that you have to be part of the marketplace. There has to be a central mechanism, a pool, where you put the power generated and where you take the generated power to use. So I cannot say that I can say I'm buying power from Önder, but I cannot say that I'm using the actual physical electrons that he is producing. Now, he may not even be producing electrons, he may just be a trader from buying from someone else. So whatever I get out of the pool, and whatever people or investors produce, they put into a pool. So this is the sort of some market mechanisms enables actually the flow between the generation and the consumption. So if we put this information together, we can see the value chain in view. It actually has four main parts from the generation of power to the point or to the location of consumption. What happens is that first you generate your power and you transmit it over long distances. Like you have all these power plants in remote locations, so you have to carry them to the city centers, to the points where you consume them. And you have to regulate it, which means decrease the voltage, or let's say decrease the intensity of power on the line, so that you can able to run it, so that your refrigerator does not explode with all the excessive power that's flowing. And you consume. And they can be at separate locations. They don't have to be by each other. I mean, the first times in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when the power was started to be used widely in residential and commercial activities, they had these generating facilities located inside the cities. Even in Turkey, in Silahlara, there was a coal plant in Istanbul. And it was using coal mined out from the current location of the third airport. So they were carrying coal with the trains all the way inside the city and generating power with coal and then serving the city with the power. But as the societies grew, as the cities grew, they had to take these plants outside the city because they create a lot of technical problems and environmental problems. And right now, no one sees and no one cares where those plants are. So, in summary, this is the story of how the electrons find their ways into our refrigerator. Instead of having the diesel engine at the back of your refrigerator, you have it somewhere else. And you have all this value chain that links the delivery to your location. So, within this energy habitat, there are three important dimensions emerge for policymakers as key considerations for shaping up the policies or making the regulations around that define the policies. And this was first used by World Energy Council, which is a supranational organization on energy matters, not just power. And these three pillars are, I will go into each of them separately, is energy security, which means can you have power whenever you like it, or whenever you want it, basically. Energy equity, accessibility and affordability, which means that is it cheap enough so that it creates economic welfare. It helps companies to run and carry on the costs related with power generation. It's so much inside everything that if you raise the power prices, everything from the water you drink, the food you eat, will actually be more expensive because energy is involved in the process that brings you the things you consume. And the third dimension is environmental sustainability. How ecologically friendly is it? I mean, how does it fit within the scheme of the greater good regarding the environmental awareness and the global climate? And this is actually, this came over time. This trilemma actually emerged over time. First instance, it was just energy security. Whether you have power or not, you didn't care about the cost or the environmental impact. You needed the power. If not everyone had the power, if you want the power, you need the power, you get the power. And then it was about economic growth and the working of the engine of the industrial mechanisms. And so you needed cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and you needed to have it. You need to have some sort of independence regarding this power availability. And then it was about, lastly, I think in the modern times, and it's an issue about maybe 10, 20 years. It was like a very faint noise before that. There were people, environmental activists before already, but people were not aware of this problem that's going to affect our lives a lot in the future. It's about environmental sustainability. I mean, what does this plant, or what does this power generation activity do to your future habitat, your future ecosystem? What sort of a world are you going to leave up to your children because of your consumption of power? And there are, for each of these aspects, the three aspects, there are a lot of underlying questions, and these are not easy to answer. And I'm not here today with a set of answers already in place, or someone claiming to have all the answers to your questions, because even the most friendly form of energy has some drawbacks and difficulties surrounding it. So I will try to create a discussion around what makes us choose one plant over the other. What makes the policymakers decide to build a nuclear power plant instead of a solar facility or a wind power plant? And what makes us to cut down those trees and build a hydroelectric power plant over that river instead of just leaving it as it is? So going deeper into these three aspects of the trilemma, so energy security is basically in three questions. Can you have power every single time you want it? You wouldn't expect, I mean, you would be outraged. You would be very angry if you didn't have power at home for 24 hours and your refrigerator will melt and your food will spoil, and you would be very unhappy about it, but you also want to be sensible about it, about the power you get. So this is one phase of the security question. The second security-related question is, do you have excess dependence on a single resource or an outside partner? It means, is all your power coming out from coal, or is all your power coming out from solar? So it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, you know the story. I mean, if you put everything in one space, if you lose one, you may lose all. Or is it like Turkey? Are you heavily dependent on imports? Are you heavily dependent on gas? And all that gas is coming from Russia, so it affects your geopolitical relations, your diplomatic relations. And if you have a problem with Russia, if they cut down the gas, you have a problem of power generation, which affects everything in your life. So this is the dependence or independence is a very key concept that has to be managed. And the third dimension is also something that has recently been emerging at the back of the minds of the policymakers, is that do you rely on excessive use of energy for economic growth? What is the intensity of energy that you use for your economic activities? I can give a concrete example from Turkey. For example, Turkish policymakers has always been, how can I say, very proud of the amount of consumption in Turkey. They were saying our per capita consumption has increased this much and our total market demand is this much. But this is not something that doesn't necessarily mean something good. I mean, you can produce more while spending less energy. You can be more efficient. And you can be producing more value with less energy. So this should be the key concept. So this is actually something recently that's starting to emerge. In European countries, for example, the trends we see in even large economies like Germany or France, we see that the energy intensity actually comes down, starts to come down because of the efficiency improvements, which means they're consuming less, producing more with that less energy. It's either the machines that produce goods start consuming less energy, or they redesign the system so that they can produce more with the same amount of energy. So this is also a good concept. So to reply to these questions, we need to understand the difficulties surrounding this continuous and on-demand supply. Like the example I have given at the start of the talk. You want, the moment you turn your microwave, you want the energy to be there. But how does the system, how does the resources manage this sort of fluctuation or demand? I mean, at night time everybody is sleeping, and when it's dark everybody has the lights on, and in the morning everybody wakes up, starts consuming energy. At evening time everybody's in front of their TVs and start consuming a lot of energy. So you have to have a means to reply these volatility of energy demand, and different resources have different properties. Like thermal power plants, like coal and nuclear. This is sort of a hint of the answer actually that's coming up to the trilemma question. The conventional forms of energy generation operate on a continuous basis, which means they operate on demand and they can operate continuously without interruption. Whereas the renewable sources of generation are intermittent, which means they have to come and go. They come and go. You produce power from the sun, but if you have a big cloud in front of the sun, then the amount of power you generate actually drops. So in order to have that solar facility as part of the supply system, remember the pool as a source that's pouring water into the pool, you need to have some sort of a backup, right? So if something happens to the sun, if you can't start generating from the sun when you want it, you have to have some backup source readily available to be able to fill in the gap that's left by the sun. So this is actually a profile of power production in Germany. And you can see the dark color is the conventional forms of generation, and the green is wind and yellow is sun. You can see that the conventional form actually takes up most of the power generation, most of the requirement. This is probably the weekend or something else. So most of the power generation, and the solar is like a spoiled kid. It comes and goes, and you have to adapt to that. You have to actually adjust all your system around this coming and going of solar. So there's a cost associated with this. Remember the value chain. We had transmission and distribution and all the regulation processes going on. You have to have some means to be able to manage the volatility that comes with this intermittent form of power generation. And see here, there is so much wind in the system. What happened here? There's so much wind in the system. It's the same demand, but since there's so much wind, the conventional plants have to be shut down in order to make space for the renewables. You can't stop the wind blade from turning. It's dangerous for the equipment. You cannot cover the solar panels. You have to have them there. You cannot let them generate and give the energy, electricity to the ground. You give it to the system. So what happens when you shut down the conventional plants? They give you the flexibility to manage it. So this is the fundamental difficulties surrounding the problem of generation on demand. The other aspect was energy equity, accessibility and affordability. And the two fundamental question is that does everyone have enough power for it? An industrial facility, does it have enough power from the grid? Can it have enough power from the grid if it wants to grow? And is it affordable? Does it come at a price that can that helps economic growth? Well, this was a very big topic, a hot debate in Turkey for some time in the early 2000s. Why? Because our demand projections, which means what we think that we are going to consume over the course of the following years, was worrying in the sense that we may not have been able to meet up to demand. We may not have been able to generate enough power to supply the demand. But so there was a question of, there was a concern on policymakers whether are we going to have enough investments of power generation. And then comes the policy response. Then comes the regulations or the marketplace mechanisms or the support mechanisms that actually invite the investors to build something, to invest in power generation, or the state itself starts investing in power generation. And here we have the concept of energy poverty, like the definition of poverty. If you can see that the African countries are actually are not in a good position in terms of energy consumption, but also in terms of GDP per capita. Meaning that they're poor and they consume less power. Whereas countries like the United States, they're rich and they consume a lot of power. But compare it to Canada, for example, or let's say Japan, almost as rich, but consuming way less power than what the other guys are consuming. So this means that the intensity of power use is not something that's dictated, or it's not something that's written on stone. It depends on the structure of your economy, how you generate welfare for your people, and how much power you consume on the way. So it doesn't necessarily mean more welfare to have more power, having that much demand. And the third aspect, as mentioned, which is sort of more recent concern, is the sustainability. What about the climate effects? What about the emissions of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases, which are bad for the environment? And what is the level of environmental impact I can take in order to supply power? This is a very subjective argument, basically. If I am very hungry, I can actually go out and hurt someone else to feed myself, right? So if a country does not have power, and it wants the power for economic growth, it doesn't care about the trees, or it doesn't care about the seaside, or the river over there. It just wants to produce power for its own economy. But even the renewable sources have some sort of impact. They're not impact-free. They have some impact. So this also needs to be considered. And recently we have a developing approach on the society. It's called the not in my backyard approach. They say that, people say that, okay, I want ecologically friendly energy, but not in my backyard. Do it somewhere else. I want wind power, but I don't like the view of the wind powers with the windmills on the shoreline. Don't build on my province. So this is a sort of one of the emerging difficulties. So, in summary, so confusing things, but this problem with many faces. In summary, we have to have a holistic approach to make decisions, policy decisions, and you have to consider all the factors that exist within this technical and commercial ecosystem. But what I can say, based on experience, is that it's always wrong to design something, to design a system, only looking at past experiences and accuracy. Because technology is evolving, and the times are changing, and we have to be looking ahead and trying to see what's going to happen and what am I going to do to cope with that changes. And you have to adapt to those changes. So the decision makers need to evaluate options and consequences accordingly. But there's always the question in society if this unchecked capitalist greed, the way I call it, is it what determines where the investments are going or which trees are going to be cut? And actually, it's the policymakers and the regulators' responses or the directions that they give in an open market system that defines what is going to happen and where it is going to happen. But the policymakers need to be very competent in terms of being able to forecast, predict what's going to happen in the future and what sort of scenarios are possible and what sort of policy responses are more feasible or viable for their general goals. So what is costly now may actually create more welfare in the future, and it can be vice versa. What is good now can be very costly in the future. I like the Germany example here. Over the course of the past 10-15 years, Germany has experienced a major energy change of direction. They call it Energiewende. They switched from, instead of conventional sources, they started subsidizing the renewable generation, and they invested heavily in solar power. And this had a tremendous cost on their economy, actually. If you look at the power prices in Germany have actually increased with the introduction of renewables. But what's happening is that they are gaining their freedom. They are right now paying the price for their future sons and daughters so that they can have an independent energy system and they won't be tied up to the conventional sources that pollute the environment. So this is the sort of decision that you may have to make. But when you make it today, it can have consequences within the population. People may not like you for making those decisions. Now the major drawback here is something called the time value of money. I don't know how familiar you are with this concept, but almost all of the energy-related decisions, unless they're given by individuals with very solid outlook regarding the future, capability to judge regarding environmental values, almost all of the decisions in the system are they revolve around the concept of time value of money. And what does time value of money mean? Time value of money means this. What is a large sum of money in the future actually means a smaller sum of money now. It means that the money with time needs to constantly grow and it needs to create a return. And if I invest in something, I need to get more out of that thing in the future for me to make that investment. And if you give me 110 liras next year, and if you ask me to replace it with something today, I can be happy with something less today. Instead of 110 liras, I can be happy with just 100 liras. Because what happens is that I eliminate the risk of that time period from today and the time that you're going to deliver me the money. I eliminate the time risk and the risk of not receiving the money, and I have it today, and for that I can give you a discount. So this is basically the concept of the time value of money that makes it difficult to actually evaluate the virtues of the environmental good. So the translation to the current economic system is that the capitalism will cut down the tree if it cannot sell the shadow. This is a very famous saying. I don't know if you know who said this one, but I couldn't find it. It basically says that if the market cannot benefit from the shadow, it doesn't care about the tree. So there has to be a benefit to the shadow. But how do you calculate the benefit of the shadow within an economy that runs on time value of money? How can you value it? So there are actually three mainstream methods for valuation for that sort of goods or assets. I'll try to explain it with an example. Think about this. Think about this phone, okay? The first question I have when valuing this phone would be how much money I can earn out of using this phone in the future. Let's say I can take pictures of you and I can sell you the pictures, right? And the amount of money I'm going to collect by taking pictures and selling them to you actually drives the value of this phone for me. Or I can make calls and arrange some business with this phone, and probably those activities may be able to drive the value of this phone for me. This is the first method of valuation. So think about the shadow of the tree. What is the present value of the future earnings from such a shadow? Am I going to collect money from people for lying under that shadow? And even if I do, even if it's a paid facility, it will be much less compared to the industrial machine that produces power, right? Because there's a marketplace for it and I can sell it. So this is, if you make this comparison, the shadow loses. One. The second method is the comparable company analysis, let's say. When I say comparable, is there a history, with the phone example again, are there similar phones owned by people? And how much are they valuing it for? Or our shadow, are there similar shadows somewhere? And what is the value of those shadows? So that I can compare it with my shadow. But no, it's very difficult to get the value. You cannot ask Norway how much their fjords costs or their lush landscapes costs. They won't be able to give you a value, so you won't be able to compare it with the physical reality of your money machine, the power generation machine. So your shadow loses again. Okay? And the third aspect is that the comparable transaction analysis, which means that is there a previous history of buying and selling of that good? Like, what was this phone sold for in the market last year or last week? Can I get it as a reference? Can I use it as a reference for my current transaction? Of our shadow, is there a previous history of that shadow being valued or being sold and bought? No. So I don't care about your shadow. I mean, your environmental assets are intangible. You cannot calculate the value of the tree or the water stream or blue sky with something that's physically generating money in the current system. So if the policymaker does not stop me as an investor, I don't care about your shadow. I mean, I'm going to build a power plant over that stump of your tree. I have my tree in my backyard. I don't care about your tree. If someone does not stop me, yours can be sacrificed. So we need the policymakers here to actually step in and to control this capitalist scheme. If this policy-making environment allows the investor to go vagabond, to do whatever he wants, it will cut down the tree. It doesn't care about your tree. I mean, most of the investors of the power plants on the north coast of Turkey, probably, I mean, financiers or the main investors who are benefiting out of this investment probably have never been there. They don't care about me. It's not their backyard. So, in this open market system, the policymakers are not making the final decisions, but they're creating the environment in which investors make the decisions. And they can provide some sort of policy guidance. They have to provide some sort of policy guidance to make sure that an individual gain does not harm the greater good. Okay? You want the power, you need to generate the power, but you shouldn't have to sacrifice a lot to have the power. So, This open and free market means no central investment decisions, only regulatory guidance, so investors stay loose. You ask the investors, you create the rules of the game and they play the game. But if your regulatory mechanisms are hindered, and if you don't have a strong judiciary system, then a form of nepotism actually emerges, which means that certain regulations may favor certain interest groups or certain individuals, which means that the rules of the game start changing and start favoring one player over the other. Okay? And this unpredictability actually is a vicious cycle. It creates uncertainty. Uncertainty brings risk, and in economical terms, risk equals return. So unpredictability requires more return, which means more ambition or more greed to cut more trees or destroy more landscape. Okay, so I'm actually wrapping up. This is an endless topic. We can discuss for hours. What I came up to with as an answer to this question of why we are still building coal and nuclear plants instead of renewable facilities is that because currently the renewables are not feasible on their own. They need financial support. They are not good investments. In the eyes of the investor, they are not good enough investments to actually promise to generate money. So they need some sort of support, like feed-in mechanisms or they need some sort of incentives, financial, to make them financially viable. That's one reason. Second reason, the technology is yet to adapt or change its needs. Remember the graph of the solar, the spoiled child of solar coming in and going out every time it wants. I mean, it's technically not feasible right now to have everything coming out of solar because it won't be able to meet up to our different needs, day-to-day needs. You need to have some sort of conventional generation to be able to back up that solar facility. So technically, we are not there yet. The third reply I have in my mind is that you have a lot of historical investments in place. You have that facility built 10 years ago, and it's still generating money. It still has to generate money for its investor. You cannot tell him to shut up or shut down at an instant. It has to, actually there has to be a transfer period in this. It has to go down slowly. There has to be some sort of transformation. So you need time for this phasing out, which, for example, Europe is doing right now. With the directive, they have given time for the coal-fired plants to actually adopt to environmental regulations or phase out. And they put forward very strict financial conditions, the financial consequences if they don't do. It's up to their choice. They do their own time value of money calculation and phase out accordingly. Fourth reply I have in my mind is that poorer economies want their own share of polluting the world with cheaper energy, as it is right now. I have coal sitting in my backyard in Turkey, for example. We still have coal under the ground. And you industrial nations have polluted the world for years, and it's now my turn to pollute it. You can't ask me to, leave my ingenious resources in the ground and give up my wealth. I want my own share of polluting. So it creates a complication, which is actually more expensive later, but we need to have that sort of vision. So if these are the reasons, so how does the current success stories happen? Like Germany, and Germany is a very widespread example everyone's talking about when you talk about renewables. How did the energy when they happened? How did Germany make the transition? Because they already have a lot of conventional resources already in place. They have a lot of nuclear power, they have a lot of coal power, and they are well placed within a grid. Look at Poland. I mean, 90% of Poland's power is coming out from dirty coal. And the dirty coal is what Germany turns its face to in times of the solar not generating. If Poland was not there generating with coal, the German revolution wouldn't have happened like this. Simply put. And they have invested heavily in their grid to be able to make that sudden switch. So this is basically my view and my replies to this question. And my viewpoint is that we need time to actually make the transition to a more...
Is it? May I just...
Yeah.
So are you saying this? For instance, this pool, the pool analogy was very nice. Yeah, that pool should be filled all the time. It should stay filled in order to extract energy from it. In order to make sure that it is filled, you need, on the one hand, you need the conventional technology, but at the same time, the renewable technology that can feed it. And so that when the renewable is available, people will use it, and you shut down all the conventional, but they there. You place them and you make.
You can shut down, but it comes with a cost.
And you shut down them, but of course you keep on paying them. You keep on putting some coals next to it. You make it available, but you don't use it. All the all the infrastructure necessaries
has to be built. There's a standby cost, let's say.
And it should be there, standing, and then but you are using this naughty child, the solar energy. So this needs a lot of money.
You have to have that backup. You have that standby. And the thing with the German example is that they already paid for that backup.
Before the story.
Right? They are saying they are phasing out nuclear power by 2020. Why 2020? Because they need time for the phasing out. They could even expect to turn off the plants right now. They are not doing it, right? Why? Because they need time for the transition. And they are giving themselves the time for transition. For phasing out of the conventional and introduction and more introduction of the renewable and the capacity of the grid, the value chain, capacity of the value chain to be able to adopt it. But this is all I can say for now. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Questions, comments?